I'm going through a phase of training for power recruitment and grip endurance. My body weight today is 65.5, a bit sub-prime, with prime probably being between 62 and 64 these days. Not quite the sylph-like climber I used to be when I weighed in right on the button at 60 kilograms. With winter clothes I come to 68.1, with a weighted vest I'm at 87.7, an additional 34% body weight, and with the belt too 94.1, or an extra 44% body weight. First some balance and small jumps to get warmed up. Having lots of weight high up really affects your balance, and you're forced to learn better balance patterns and neural activation, particularly in your feet and hips. Pull-ups on a rolly bar requires forearm activation to maintain the wrist angle as the bar tries to roll out of your grip, and also full grip activation so you don't pop off the bar. Pulling up while all this goes on adds to the joy. I can barely hang this hold without the weight, so with the weights vest use the upright pole to help me to somewhere around 6 to 10 seconds. The only important thing for me in this exercise is to go to the absolute limit of my strength by trying really hard. This is an exercise which doesn't get useful until you start struggling. Each release and snatch at the bar drills away your power endurance, and your job is to tell your brain you're just fine and can make another one, and another until gravity tells you can't. Power activation. Most of your dyno power comes from your legs, so start jumping if you haven't already, and if you have, tell your muscles to ping harder. 80 centimeters is probably below average, but I'm better than I used to be. Pull-ups on a bar. It's surprising how much harder it is with a weighted vest on when the weight is high than it is with the weight dangling by a rope from your hips. Pulling up is just as hard, but pulling in to get your chin over the bar is much harder. And if your chin isn't over the bar, it doesn't count. Running up the warped wall is a daunting task. With a weight vest on too, it's onerous. It's shocking just how high you can't get. The devil steps for ninjas, or for obstacle racers, the stairway to heaven. In the beginning it's a smooth pull through, but this quickly changes into a struggle for every step you make. See how I linked Led Zeppelin with the police there. Getting some spring off a trampoline with the extra weight requires good neural patterns for jumping, then locking, then pushing. It's just like balance training, all about nerves sensing movements and subtly changing the reaction of muscles to stay in balance, then the action of muscles to provide controlled movement. Sprints, strides and jumps on the climbing mat. I'm not sure if doing it on a mat which gives slightly is the best training, but in terms of preventing damage it's a winner. The salmon ladder is all about power and technique, and the power to achieve the technique, then the power endurance to do it repeatedly. With an elephantine body weight, multiple moves are a distant goal, but singles are at least possible. I used to find this easier, I'm sure, but then I used to find a lot of things easier, like getting out of bed in the morning without a JCB to do the heavy lifting. Campusing is all about learning to snatch at and keep hold of a hold which most people wouldn't classify as a hold. This is called recruitment, the ability to fire off 100% of everything you've built up through excessive years of training, for that split second to resist the opening of finger ends that means the difference between staying the course or falling. Training recruitment is far more a neurological thing than training for biological growth. You must give it everything you have to improve. Not trying harder than hard is not an option. Here's a commercial break for the next Tarzan film. It's called King of the Swingers. The scriptwriters haven't thought that one through yet. The broad jump, stand on the ground, jump forwards. The distance between the front of your toes at takeoff and the position of the back of your heels at landing is your distance, very unfair for long-footed people. The wall run. On a good day, I'm not very good. Here you can see optically that I'm doing suboptimally in a substandard sort of a way. I've seen worse, but not often. I never do dips, can't see the point. Make it a challenge though and I might get interested. 3 dips must be a record for right-handed people called Nigel, born before Britain last won the World Cup and still with some hair on his head and a semi-functioning libido. Lock-offs, strength training. Or in this case not lock-offs, negative resistance training in the hope of one day achieving a lock-off. If you can't do it, this is what you should be doing. Don't forget how hard you have to try. Is it A, 10%, B, 20%, or C, 100%? Some might suggest you have to give it 110%, but that only means they don't really understand percentages. I can barely hold the rolly bar with one hand without any weight, so holding it with an extra chunk of superfluousness sorry, shouldn't say superflu, is going to be a challenge. We're back to pull, release, snatch, all recruitment and power endurance training. Maybe I should up the weight, as I probably did too many in this case. The gibbons are an obstacle racer's delight if they can do it, or a nightmare if they can't. It requires lots of strength to stop the bar rolling and some nifty hand-eye coordination to get the bar into the next hanger. Doing it with extra weight is like watching an HMRC inspector peel open your hand and take your last fiver and not having the heart to do anything at all about it. If you don't know what that feels like, don't worry, you soon will. Quick set of hangs on a few Beastmaker holds. And finally the culmination of the opus, the finale, the opulent crescendo of magnificent pain that is doing long, easy climbs with too much gravity. There are lots of planets out there, the so-called super-Earths. It's been estimated that the strongest of us on a super-Earth with 5 times our gravity wouldn't even be able to stand up. Imagine even twice our gravity would be like climbing with your best mate on your back. But imagine if you did train like that and then came back to Earth. You'd be like a man on Mars, which has only 40% of our gravity. You'd be the greatest crusher of all time. It's my plan anyway, even with a mere 44% extra. Watch out for me come next May when the BMC climbing competitions get started. People will be pointing and saying, "Who's that ace climber? Is it Johnny Dawes?"